Hey Mas, how you doing? Good to see you again, brother.
I'm fine, man. Good to
Good.
see you too.
Yeah, good to catch up with you last week. And it's August the 20. No, it's not. It's July the 28th. What am I talking about?
July the 28th,
I
yeah.
think, I think I'm wishing time away because of obviously the situation we're in. It's almost like
Yeah,
we talk about not wishing our lives away, but it's almost like you want these phases of return and processes to speed up a little so that we can have some form of, I don't know, some form of familiarity as to what we had at the beginning of the year. But who knows? I mean, it is
yeah.
what it
Is
is.
it the new normal? Is it the new normal?
People terminology.
Buzzword.
It's like we've become used to these kind of like strap lines and buzzwords, isn't it? Like flattening the curve, the new normal, make Britain great again. It's like, I don't know, it's like we've become victims to these strap lines and protocols. But for me, um, here in Qatar, we've just entered phase 3, which means that there's another relaxation, meaning that swimming pools are now opening, gyms are opening, obviously with the social distancing measures in place. It's all still a little bit kind of Orwellian and dystopian, but it is what it is, and these rules need to be kind of complied with, and hopefully soon we'll all
Yeah.
hugging, kissing, and being human again.
Hopefully,
So
hopefully, man.
today we're going to talk about breathing.
Which
I
is quite actual.
yeah,
Breathing is quite
yeah,
sort of
it's
relevant.
very pertinent in today's
Yeah,
environment of wearing masks. The
yeah,
fear, anxiety, raised levels of stress, unpredictability, and I think
yeah,
breathing obviously is one of those involuntary things that we do. So for many people, it's not actually considered in their day-to-day lives, and
yeah,
certainly not as a healing modality. But as practitioners, as osteopaths, we see how breathing not only can proliferate or contribute to discomfort and pain and disease, how it can actually be affected by pain, disease, environmental stress, psychological stress, physical stress. And so, as an involuntary act, I think it can be sometimes disregarded, and I think it's really important that we kind of highlight the benefits of such a therapeutic and simply applied intervention in order to really
yeah.
help people, kind of maximize their recovery, um, improve their lives in many shapes, ways, and forms. So,
Absolutely.
I think we should just get into it. And, first of all,
Yeah, and
go on.
yeah. No, I would say benefits which were absolutely known. Probably we don't have an official factual answer for when humanity started, uh, engaging and exploring the benefits of breathing. But surely we we can easily suspect that it's been since the dawn of time, since you know human awareness surfaced. But I mean, I think that what we know is just that if we look into some sort of um, structure, tradition, obviously let's say we all know that the Hindu tradition, the ancient Indian yogis and sages, they already had a lot to say about let's call it therapeutic breathing, and yeah, one above one above all is the famous Patanjali, who wrote this body of scripture called the Yoga Sutra, and it's just basically literally what the important thing is what they aimed for through breathing, which was to reach the so-called samadhi, the enlightenment. But over the centuries, this sort of went more into medical application of breathing. So, as you were saying a few minutes ago, so the tradition, some other sages incorporated this tradition. For example, there is this other sage called Thirumula, who literally explored all these therapeutic application. So it's very interesting. And nowadays, if you look, you go on the internet, you go on YouTube, and you see how many modern actual breathing systems are available. You got holotropic breathing, you got pranayama, which is basically the lineal tradition. But then you got very recent, you got the Wim Hof method, you got the oxygen advantage. It's amazing. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. You know, whether it's martial arts, ancient religions, exercise modalities, you know, breathing is at the core of many of these. And you know, like you said, pranayama, especially in things like yoga and tai chi. And you know, there's so much research now, which is you know, suggesting that we can reduce anxiety, depression, stress, and just really, you know, in quite an instantaneous, you know, kind of situation, and also improving things like heart rate variability.
Absolutely.
It improves our adaptability and resilience to stress. So, you know, as I said, it's one of those simple things that we do every day, but we don't really pay attention to. So from a clinical perspective, what are the common things you see with patients when it comes to, you know, their patterns of discomfort and breathing? Do you see these kind of common, how would I say, these commonalities between the way that they're feeling and the way that they're breathing?
Yeah, absolutely. If you know, with time, you build this normally, as in every other profession, you build this experience, empirical and observational experience, and you realize that many patients. I work in London, so just by definition is, you know, a metropolis like Doha, and you realize how in this day and age, stress and anxiousness, they are literally, unfortunately, inbuilt in our life. And that necessarily is mirrored in posture, in how the patients sit and how the patient is positioned when they talk. So you see, generally, there is a tendency to a shallow breathing, and by shallow breathing, I mean, you know, like some sort of contraction, like some sort of, how can I say, an implosion, a postural implosion.
A restriction almost, like a
restriction, loss of tension. And yeah, shallow breathing creates an inspiratory position, which means basically as if we are always in air hunger. So that you can understand how much this influenced literally the daily routine, the activity that we do. And that is, we know that there is a syndrome called hyperventilation syndrome, which is basically, it encompasses an umbrella of let's say, a secondary dysfunction, like, you know, lightheadedness, fatigue, sleep, non-restorative sleep, little neurological symptoms like pins and needles and numbness, anxiousness. So all these things, unfortunately, I think we go almost, unconsciously hand in hand with this thing, as if it is something absolutely physiological, whereas obviously it's not. It's just a proper dysfunction.
Yeah.
So,
and it's like we discussed last week with regards to how osteopathy looks at not just the symptoms, but the person and how they're interacting with their environment. And as osteopaths, we're observing our patients as soon as we see them. And it could be the way they get out of the chair. It could be the way that they're walking. It could be the way that they're holding their shoulders.
Yeah.
Obviously, breathing is a part of that. So when a person opens their mouth and they're talking, you can get a feel. There can be this intuitiveness and a real sense of a kind of energy coming from the person. Whether they're speaking fast, are they taking shallow breaths between sentences? Are they, you know, is their posture active? Now, ultimately, yes, we want to have a scientific approach, but there is this art. There is this art, and it's about building up a profile of what we we come used to seeing in a relaxed kind of presence, or a anxious presence, or a stressed presence, or a burdened kind of, you know, presentation. And I think you do, over time, you build these profiles and you start to understand, like, I've had patients who I've asked them, have you had any breathing problems? Have you had any emphysema, bronchitis, asthma? And, you know, I've had an intuition in my mind, just by the way they're carrying themselves and the way that they're breathing when they're talking. Okay, they haven't been in full-blown asthma attacks or haven't, you know, kind of bronchial restrictions, but it's enough for me to see that there has been restriction there, whether they're a smoker and whether they've had, you know, some form of COPD or breathing restriction. So it's this element of observation and being able to, you know, kind of, first of all, pinpoint whether somebody has these fundamental, you know, kind of dysregulations or challenges before we actually get in.
And then, you know, we know that non-verbal communication is huge, and breathing is part of this non-verbal communication. So when you look for signs, try to spot signs that add to the case history, to what the patient tells you, and you look at how the patient, that breathing together with, you know, the tone of the voice and all these other cues, breathing is massive. So yeah, I agree with you. It's just, it's absolutely, breathing is ingrained in how a person manifests themselves, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's an important thing that I realized, and also I came across, as you said, nowadays, thank God we've got so much more knowledge, so much more trials about, you know, experiment about and studies about how the body works, and breathing is not spared from this, luckily. And one thing that I've always said,
what's your current understanding of the physiology behind breathing? Tell me what you know about it.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I don't know what you made of it throughout, you know, your experience in body work. What you think? Since the beginning, since I was involved in body-mind works and personal experiences, I thought that, for example, deep breathing was the key. Like, you know, it's the old mantra, okay, breathe deeply. If you feel stressed, intake oxygen and stuff. I must say, I came across a rather, let's say, opposite stance and position that is actually definitely backed up by physiology, the respiratory physiology, which is actually, it's not like the more you intake oxygen, the more you intake air, and the better you feel. That is a very interesting thing. I'm not going to go into details, even because obviously there are people who are much more expert than me. But there was this physician in the beginning of the 19th century, Christian Bohr. He created, basically, it discovered the Bohr effect, which is basically, we need CO2, we need carbon dioxide, is a big one. We always saying, you know, we tend to reason in terms of demon and angels. So O2, good guy, CO2, bad guy, demon. Actually, possibly the opposite. As always, there is a, you know, a yin-yang dependence. So my current understanding, just to answer to your question, is that is really important to consider the fact that is not down to the more I take oxygen in and the better I feel, because actually what is being shown is that if you breathe, if you have a sort of a gentle, soft breathing, especially on your nose breathing, you create the CO2 just basically help the oxygen to be released in the tissue at a cellular level. So what happened is, yeah, I think there has been this a shift in this paradigm, and that's the most important thing. That's what, in my opinion, at the present time, is important to realize. And also,
breath holds, like sometimes get into a mildly discomfortable hold breath, which once again increase this need of oxygen because the CO2 builds up. That helps to have more energy because once again, you release more oxygen inside the tissues. I don't know, it sounds counterintuitive and quite complex, but definitely at the end of our conversation, I just mentioned a couple of experts, and it's easy. It made a difference, a big difference for me to read material and listen to them, and it's very interesting.
Well, you know, this whole idea of hypercapnia, which is, you know, a reduction in carbon dioxide, is brought about by this kind of excessively deep breathing. And like you said, we know that this kind of gentle tidal breathing, especially in through the nose, helps to soak in nitric oxide, and also
absolutely
the, you know, the oxygen saturation within the tissues. So, you know, from a clinical perspective, for me, just asking somebody to put their hand on their stomach and breathe into their stomach is, you know, it's one of those kind of Pareto principle kind of, how would I say, just modalities where you do a small thing and you get a massive benefit from it. So just that just that gentle nasal breathing and watching the stomach rise and fall, you can see the kind of tension slowly melt. You see shoulders just relax. You feel muscles relax. You know, you lift somebody's leg off the plinth and you say relax, and you let go, and the leg's still holding in the air.
Yeah.
When you get patients to just focus on deeper breathing, not deeper, sorry, but a more mindful and diaphragmatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Then the muscles just relax a little bit more. And this isn't, you know, this isn't kind of, you know, romanticism. This is the truth. It's a simple thing.
Yeah.
So for me,
it's like as if the body reclaims its normal status, its normal homeostasis, because it's like reminding the body and the mind of how the breathing should work. Yeah. And immediately you see physiological and postural changes, and it's amazing.
So, you know,
how simple.
It can take just a few 2 to 3 minutes to deactivate or to down-regulate the limbic system just through focusing your mind on your breath. So there's this marriage of presence with the breath, not just breathing, but actually having that sense of distraction taken away, where you are kind of at one with your breath. But like I said, these tiny little things create huge effects. And when I ask a patient to gently breathe in, the first thing they do is, you know, they're trying to reach for as much air as possible. And it almost, that kind of gives you that sense of, okay, this is a reflection of the way you live your life. It's like all or nothing. I've got to take everything from it or nothing at all. And it's always about trying to find that middle ground and being subtle. And I'm you know, I'm a victim of that myself. Always trying to.
We all are.
Always trying to push the stretch until, you know, my muscles almost gonna, you know, and trying to get them a workout instead of finding that middle ground where I feel good but I still feel energized. And it's the same with breathing. People either pay no attention to it at all, or they're trying too hard with the breath. And for me, it really is just like you said, when the pendulum swings one way hard, it will swing back the other and just as hard. So it's about finding that middle ground and getting people just to check in every now and again and find that new normal of, there we go again with the buzzwords.
You know,
that new kind of status quo of relaxation, instead of walking around breathing into their chest, ready for the lion to jump out of the bushes. So,
but
go on.
Yeah, I also think that there's been maybe we've been misled, and with all the good intention, even you know, the knowledge, the literature, the practice of yoga, there has been this idea that you have to intake a lot of oxygen, as we said before, and that has become like some sort of official guidelines that has been ingrained in our mind, and then you realize that actually no, it's not like that. You just simply have to breathe gently and normally. don't modify it, and magic happens.
So before we get into what you would regard, or how you would structure therapeutic breathing, what kind of subjects, what conditions do you think, and what people could benefit from therapeutic breathing?
Yeah, as we mentioned before, definitely big ones are sort of non-clinical depression, anxiety, which are all the pillars of the current, stress-related dysfunctions. So anxiety, depression, whatever it is diagnosed, that hyperventilation syndrome, which creates all this sort of this cascade of problems, as we said before, like as we said, fatigue, disturbed sleep apnea, but obviously asthma is a big one. I was reading this book and following some of this video by this expert, a breathing expert. It's called Patrick McKeown. Is Irish, and he had very severe asthma in his youth, and he was saying basically nose breathing is so important, and yet not particularly considered, or he's very often neglected in guidelines in addressing asthma. So asthma is a big one, and therapeutic breathing is should be absolutely key in challenging and addressing it.
Yeah.
It's very interested, without going into the specifics, some heart condition like supraventricular tachycardia, problem of the heart, they noticed that hold breath is very helpful in sort of, once again, addressing this type of problem. And it's interesting that Patanjali, back into ancient times, he was very strong about hold breath. We might argue what his goal was, so reaching samadhi, enlightenment, but actually it is as if back at the time they already had a perception and intuition about what nose breathing, gentle soft breathing, gentle retention, all these practices did at different medical levels. So as I said, primarily this type of conditions, definitely COPD, obviously respiratory problems, but postural problems, neck pain, shoulder pain, due to extreme tension, that once again, it's maybe due to stress for posture. Yeah.
Well, if we think about the more non-clinical or subclinical presentations that we probably see in how would I say, in conjunction with the clinical presentations. So whether it is mild anxiety, stress in its many manifestations, people who are smoking, people who are they're just living lives where they are predominantly sympathetically driven. So the sympathetic arm of their nervous system seems to be dominant in their everyday activities, whether it's going grocery shopping or whether it's getting the kids ready in the morning. They just seem to be wired. You might classify it as type A personalities and things like that. But we see these playing out, and especially in today's environment where we've got all of this unpredictability, we've got all of this change going on. There is this media-driven fear. There's our own kind of wild perceptions about what is actually going on and whether we're safe or not. And coupled with our lifestyles, you're drinking a lot of coffee, for instance, feeling as though we have to be busy. There is this real pervasive kind of culture that if we're not busy, we're not productive. If we're not, working hard and getting tired and sacrificing our health, we're not, we're not role models or anything. I just think that generally there is this real kind of toxic landscape that presents these subclinical manifestations where breathing can be such a powerful tool. So, you know, for me, it's kind of fundamental to remind people of how to breathe. Can you just spell this guy's name? Was it Patanjali? Was it
Patanjali? Yeah, I mean, it was the first Indian, one of the Indian sage yogis who started.
Spell that. So if anyone wants to have a check
Yeah.
out.
It's Patanjali, but I can send the right spelling to you. But not to worry, if you write Patanjali Yoga, probably even if the spelling is not perfect, it comes out because it's literally the founding father of pranayama. So you'll find it definitely. Yeah.
If you just write P and think about it, Google will intuitively. Or Alexa will read your mind and probably.
Yeah, exactly. Such an amazing trap.
Okay, so give us a couple of tips on how to safely and effectively use therapeutic breathing.
Yeah. So the first tip would be about the quality of breathing. Once again, I like to mention this person, and I send the right spelling to you because he made a big difference in my understanding, Patrick McKinnon. And he said, you know, breathing should be, once again, soft, light, effortless, breathing with the nose. And you should have a gentle pause on the exhale, which is basically, and the great thing is, applying this kind of idea of gentle, effortless, basically, I would also almost say natural, but at the same time, getting into a bit of a prolonged pause after the exhalation. That does the trick that we were talking about before. It recalibrate the tolerance to carbon dioxide, and where we become more tolerant to carbon dioxide, we get more readily available oxygen in our body and at a cellular level. So you do yourself a great service in understanding this technique. So a simple example, just to make it a little bit clearer for our listener, is just literally, I call it the 1-to-2 or 1-to-3 breathing ratio. You decide to breathe in literally a couple of seconds, breathe in, and the breathing out probably could be 4-5 seconds, so longer exhalation. And in the end, you can spend a couple of seconds in complete exhalation apnea. And one tip would be, I do this generally, here and there during the day, just get into these breathing patterns for, even if it was 1 minute, that automatically, as you were saying before, downregulate our sympathetic drive. So, you know, our fight and flight response might be addressed by that. We just go back into a more quiet mindset. And another tip would be sometimes intentionally get into, in a safe way, into some breath holds for a few seconds. And this once again increase quietness and peace of mind, calmness. And as always, it works nicely on the oxygen intake. Yeah, I think that definitely this would be a couple of things to do.
Yeah,
definitely. But
just to go back to Patrick McKeown, I'm sure I heard an interview with him and Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and he was talking also about runners actually using nasal breathing because
absolutely,
you know, runners traditionally would at a certain intensity would need to breathe with their mouth. Actually, studies have shown that they can soak in more oxygen by practicing breathing from their nose, so they can actually be more relaxed at higher intensities, which sounds counterintuitive, but I can, you know,
absolutely
understand the theory behind that.
That was what I had to realize in my mind, that as a physiological law that you can't really deny, that's a great gift, because you realize, okay, I need
carbon dioxide, and I need to think that air hunger, it can be natural sometimes when we and the effect is not breathing in as much as I can, because paradoxically, taking deep breath, even for asthmatic people, Patrick McKeown was saying, even for asthmatic people, trying to breathe in with your mouth and intake air as if you have a lot of air hunger, paradoxically cause the opposite effect, vasoconstriction, irritation of the airways. Whereas when it's nose breathing, first of all, you humidify the air, you make it slightly warmer, bacteria obviously are contained, and you create a general vasodilation, as you said, due to nitric oxide. So it all physiologically take us to the idea that it's so important not to breathing in excessively, but working on a more subtle, gentle situation. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
No, it's perfect. It's simple. It's applicable anywhere in the daytime, any part of your day, even when you're underwater. So I mean, you know, it's a win-win. And like I said, it's a small thing that brings a huge effect. And we've got principles such as the Buteyko method. We've got box breathing,
absolutely,
special forces and athletes. But one of the philosophies, I think, one of the main characteristics or commonalities is that they are focusing on a kind of a more focused or longer exhalation, where, you know, and we know that when we breathe in, there is a fluctuation in our heart rate. So we get a slightly elevation of our heart rate when we breathe in, and then a decrease as we breathe out. So it would suggest that there is a more relaxing response to a longer exhale. So yeah, I mean, whether it's box breathing, count to 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, or just this nice, you know, method that you're saying, this kind of ratio of 1 to 2 with a slightly longer exhale, it's absolutely perfect.
I mean, you realize that Buteyko, this Russian physician, he did an incredible work, and Patrick McKeown was one of these. He studied it extensively, so there are some connection between some. But it's interesting, for example, if you look into the Wim Hof method, is literally diametrically the opposite. Big breathing, fast breathing, open mouth, and not to say this triggers different physiological effects, but it's got powerful beneficial effect on the mind. So it's always, I think there's an element of I don't like the word wrong approach, but there is no wrong or right. There is, as long as there is, as me and you, we know, as long as there is a good rationale for it, a good prolonged and empirical and scientific evidence for applying these techniques, that's the most important thing. So
that's it. And as you said, we look at the specificity of the patient's needs. Ultimately, we could generally say that people are more sympathetically driven or fight or flight driven. So we would generally tend to focus more on down-regulating the nervous system, as opposed to creating a kind of a sympathetic drive to create readiness, such as, you know, more what the Wim Hof method does. But at the same time, yes, it's absolutely individual to the presentation that's in front of us. And just to kind of round it off, just bringing our presence into our breath, which we haven't mentioned much, a simple act of closing our eyes it can modify the electrical activity of the brain and bring that extra sense of calm and relaxation to what we're doing. So we're kind of shutting off the outside world, bringing our attention to our breath, and really kind of enhancing that effect. So yeah, I think it's been amazing. Simple but effective.
Simple is always good.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to shoot now, Mas, because I've got another patient waiting. But a pleasure as always to talk. We're going to be back next week. Probably talk about something, you know, something related, maybe a bit of mindfulness even, or, you know.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. Breathing and mindfulness is just like that.
Yeah. So you know, rather than going down the kind of rigid and scientific kind of scientific kind of theme of things, we want to bring in history, philosophy, you know, all of these things that bring a sense of art to what we do. And our anecdotal experiences are very important. We might say that this isn't proved in literature, that's not proved in literature. It's really important that we are connecting with the everyday person that walks into our clinic and resonating with them through our experiences. So, you know, this is why I love talking to you, because we can really span the spectrum of, you know, whether it's history, religion, philosophy, art, and science, and bring everything together to give people very simple little interventions that can quite literally, you know, change their health. So, Mas?
Absolutely.
Great. Love you.
The pleasure is always mine as well. And I look forward to talk to you next time.
Absolutely, Major. Take care, brother.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.